We were taught that if you dream big enough, money will eventually find you. That desire is the starting point of every success story. That wanting more, badly enough, is proof that you're on the right path. And maybe that belief stayed with you longer than you'd like to admit. You imagined a lighter life, a quieter sense of security, a future where money stopped being a background anxiety and became something neutral, almost boring. You weren't lazy, you weren't careless, you did what responsible people do. You worked, you planned, you hoped. And yet, something never quite clicked. The strange part is this: the more people dream about money, the more exhausted they tend to feel. Not because they lack ambition, but because dreaming creates motion without direction. There is a difference almost no one explains. Money does not respond to desire. It never has. Money responds to perception, to the way you interpret time, to the way you make decisions when motivation is gone and no one is watching, to the way you think when progress feels slow, quiet, and unimpressive. Most people stay stuck because they confuse dreaming with thinking. Dreaming feels productive, thinking feels uncomfortable. Dreaming is emotional, thinking is structural. A dream says, one day things will change. Thinking asks, what am I reinforcing today? This is where paths quietly separate. People who struggle financially often imagine money as a destination, a place they will arrive at once something finally goes right. People who build wealth see money as a consequence, something that shows up after their thinking stabilizes. They are not smarter. They are not more motivated. They are simply oriented differently. They don't ask, how much can I make? They ask, how do people who never worry about money see the world? That question changes everything. Picture money like a river. You can stand at the edge and want it. You can resent it. You can blame yourself for not being in it yet. But the river does not move because of emotion. It moves according to terrain, and that terrain is built from your thinking. When you only dream about money, you stay on the same ground, hoping the river will bend toward you. When you think differently, you slowly reshape the ground beneath your feet. There is nothing dramatic about this process, no breakthrough moment, no sudden applause. Just subtle shifts, repeated choices, a growing calm where urgency used to live. People who think like millionaires are not obsessed with money. They are obsessed with clarity, with consistency, with staying in the game long enough for time to work on their behalf. They don't chase excitement. They design stability, and over time, something quiet happens. Money begins to appear without effortful force. Not because they wanted it more, but because their thinking no longer repelled it. This audiobook is not here to promise shortcuts. It is not here to motivate you for a weekend. It exists to explore a simple shift, the moment you stop dreaming about money and start thinking the way people do, who never feel chased by it. Once that shift happens, wealth stops feeling mysterious. It becomes inevitable. And this is only the beginning. The trap of dreaming about money. Most people don't realize they're trapped, because the trap feels hopeful. Dreaming about money feels like progress. It feels productive. It feels responsible. When you imagine a better financial future, your brain releases just enough comfort to convince you that you're moving forward, even when nothing has actually changed. That's why dreaming is so seductive. It gives you emotional relief without requiring structural change. You picture a different life. You promise yourself that things will be better soon. You tell yourself that once you earn a little more, save a little more, or catch one good break, everything will finally settle. And for a moment, that thought calms you. But then the calm fades, and the cycle repeats. Dreaming becomes a substitute for progress. The problem is not that dreaming is bad. The problem is that dreaming, by itself, trains the wrong relationship with money. Dreaming places money in the future, always later, always just out of reach. And when money lives in the future, your present behavior never fully adjusts. you still make decisions based on short-term relief. You still tolerate inefficiencies. You still postpone discipline because you'll handle it when things improve. This is the invisible cost of dreaming. It delays responsibility without feeling like avoidance. Most people believe that wanting money badly enough creates momentum, but what it actually creates is emotional noise. Desire amplifies urgency. Urgency clouds judgment. Clouded judgment leads to inconsistent decisions. That inconsistency is what money quietly avoids. Think about how people behave when they are dreaming big. They swing between extremes. One week they feel motivated and optimistic. The next week they feel discouraged and impatient. They overcorrect, then retreat. They spend it to feel better. They hesitate to invest in what compounds slowly. Dreaming trains volatility, and money does not reward volatility. It rewards stability. This is why so many intelligent, hardworking people remain stuck for years while feeling like they are close. They are emotionally engaged, but structurally unchanged. Dreaming keeps your identity intact. As long as you are dreaming, you don't have to redefine who you are. You don't have to confront uncomfortable truths about how you spend, how you decide, or how you react under pressure. You can stay the same person and simply hope for a different outcome. But wealth does not come from hope. It comes from identity alignment. People who build lasting wealth don't dream about money in emotional terms. They don't fantasize about what it will fix or prove. They think about money functionally, as a system that responds to consistency, not intensity. Dreamers often ask, how can I make more? Builders ask, what patterns am I reinforcing? That difference is everything. Dreaming focuses on outcomes. Thinking focuses on inputs. Dreaming asks for results without questioning behavior. Thinking questions behavior before expecting results. This is why dreaming feels good but produces frustration, while thinking feels uncomfortable but produces calm. Another trap of dreaming is that it confuses desire with direction. Wanting something does not mean you are oriented toward it. In fact, as intense wanting often signals distance. When something feels far away, the mind compensates by imagining it more vividly. This is why people who constantly talk about money usually feel the least secure around it. Their attention is locked on the gap, not the process. People who think like millionaires rarely talk about money in emotional terms. They don't obsess over it. They don't rehearse fantasies about it. They treat it like gravity, something that responds to structure, not belief. They understand a quiet truth. Money is not persuasive. It is positioned. Dreaming tries to persuade money with emotion. Thinking positions behavior, so money has no choice but to follow. This is also why dreaming often leads to comparison. When you imagine wealth as a destination, you naturally look around to see who is ahead and who is behind. Comparison intensifies urgency. Urgency erodes patience. Patience is the price of compounding, and compounding is how wealth actually grows. The trap is subtle because dreaming feels like ambition. But ambition without structure becomes anxiety over time. You begin to feel behind, even when you're working harder than ever. You start asking, why isn't this working? You try to force outcomes. You lose trust in slow progress. At that point, many people either give up or gamble. Neither leads to wealth. The way out of this trap is not to stop wanting a better life. It is to stop using dreaming as a replacement for thinking. Thinking requires honesty. Thinking requires restraint. Thinking requires tolerating boredom and delayed feedback. Dreaming avoids all of that. That's why the shift from dreaming about money to thinking clearly about it feels uncomfortable at first. You lose the emotional highs. You lose the fantasy. You gain something quieter. Control. And control is the foundation of wealth. Once you see this trap, You can't unsee it. You begin to notice how often dreaming shows up as procrastination disguised as hope. You notice how often they desire substitutes for discipline. You notice how often urgency masks fear. This awareness is not dramatic. It doesn't come with motivation. It comes with clarity. And clarity is the first real signal that your relationship with money is beginning to change. This is where dreaming ends and thinking begins. 2. How millionaires relate to money differently. The difference is not how much money they have. It's how much emotion they don't attach to it. Most people grow up learning to feel money before they ever learn to understand it. Money becomes relief, pressure, validation, fear, status, or escape. It's rarely neutral. And because it isn't neutral, it quietly controls behavior. Millionaires don't eliminate emotion from life. They eliminate emotion from money. This is the first distinction most people miss. When money is emotional, decisions become reactive. When money is neutral, decisions become strategic. People who struggle financially often see money as something that happens to them. It arrives unexpectedly, disappears suddenly, and never seems to stay long enough. This creates a sense of fragility. Every gain feels temporary. Every loss feels personal. Millionaires relate to money as something that responds to structure, not mood. They don't see money as a reward for effort or sacrifice. They see it as feedback, a signal that tells them whether their thinking, positioning, and timing are aligned with reality. This is why they rarely feel offended by financial outcomes. A loss is not an insult. A gain is not validation. Both are information, and information is useful only when you're calm enough to interpret it. One of the quietest shifts in millionaire thinking is emotional neutrality. Not indifference. Neutrality. Money does not excite them the way it excites dreamers. It does not scare them the way it scares most people. It does not define them, because once money defines you, it controls you. People who dream about money often believe that having more of it will finally allow them to relax. But what actually happens is the opposite. Emotional attachment scales with income. Bigger numbers create bigger reactions. Bigger reactions create bigger mistakes. Millionaires understand this early. The goal is not more money. The goal is a stable relationship with money. Stability comes from predictability. Predictability comes from systems. Systems require thinking that is calm, repeatable, and unemotional. This is why millionaires don't obsess over how much they make in a single moment. They focus on how reliably value flows through their lives over time. They care more about durability than intensity. Where others ask, "How much can this make me?" they ask, "How long does this work?" This subtle shift changes everything. The people who relate emotionally to money chase spikes, raises, wins, windfalls, moments that feel like progress. But spikes decay. What rises quickly often falls just as fast. Millionaires design for continuity. They prefer income that arrives quietly, repeatedly, and predictably, even when it grows slowly, even when it feels boring, especially when it feels boring. Boredom is a signal that emotion has been removed. Another difference lies in how money is used mentally. For most people, money is imagined as freedom in the future, something that will finally allow them to choose differently, rest differently, live differently. Millionaires don't wait for money to give them permission. They design their lives as if money were already neutral. They optimize for clarity, simplicity, and leverage first, because money follows those decisions, not the other way around. This is why they often appear patient to the point of being unimpressed. They don't rush. They don't chase. They don't feel pressure to prove anything. Pressure is a tax on thinking. When people feel pressure around money, they compress time. They want results now. They overestimate short-term gains and underestimate long-term risk. They confuse movement with progress. Millionaires expand time. They understand that time is not just a resource, it is a filter. Time removes fragile strategies. Time rewards calm behavior. Time exposes emotional decision-making, so they align with time instead of fighting it. This is also why millionaires tend to protect their downside obsessively. To emotional thinkers, this looks like pessimism. In reality, it is respect for reality. They understand that staying in the game matters more than winning early. Money compounds only when it survives. People who relate emotionally to money tolerate unnecessary risk because they are chasing relief. Millionaires tolerate boredom because they are protecting continuity. Relief is temporary. Continuity is permanent. One of the most misunderstood traits of wealthy thinkers is restraint, not because they lack ambition, but because they understand trade-offs. Every decision has an opportunity cost. Every dollar has a job. Every choice shapes identity. They don't spend to signal success. They don't invest to feel smart. They don't earn to feel worthy. They act from clarity, not compensation. This is what allows money to stop being the center of their attention. When money is no longer the emotional focal point, thinking becomes cleaner. Decisions become simpler. Progress becomes steadier. And eventually, money becomes less noticeable, not because it disappeared, but because it integrated. This is the quiet advantage. When money stops dominating your emotional landscape, it starts behaving more predictably. When you stop reacting to it, it starts responding to you. This is how millionaires relate to money differently. Not with obsession, not with fear, but with calm authority. And calm authority is magnetic. Because money does not move toward excitement, it moves toward stability. That is the relationship shift most people never make. And the one that changes everything once it happens. 3. The first mindset shift. From how much can I make to how do I think? For most people, money problems begin with the wrong question. How can I make more? It sounds reasonable, responsible even. But this question quietly points attention in the wrong direction. It focuses the mind on outcomes instead of orientation, on numbers instead of behavior, on speed instead of structure. And once your thinking is pointed in the wrong direction, effort only makes you travel faster toward the wrong place. Millionaires do not start with the question of income. They start with the question of perspective, not because income doesn't matter, but because income is a downstream effect. When someone asks, "How much can I make?" they are assuming that money is something you chase, something external, something you reach for by pushing harder. Now, when someone asks, "How do I think?" they are assuming that money is something that responds, something conditional, something shaped by how decisions are made over time. This is the first real shift. The mind that asks about income is transactional. The mind that asks about thinking is architectural. Transactional thinking focuses on moments, deals, raises, opportunities. It evaluates success based on short-term gains and visible movement. Architectural thinking focuses on patterns, systems, leverage. It evaluates success based on whether today reinforces tomorrow. One mindset consumes energy, the other compounds it. Most people don't struggle because they lack opportunities. They struggle because they keep approaching every opportunity with the same internal logic. And in repeating the same logic produces the same ceiling, no matter how hard you push against it. The uncomfortable truth is this: your current financial results are not a reflection of how hard you try. They are a reflection of how you think when no one is watching, how you choose when the outcome is uncertain, how you respond when progress is slow, how you behave when there is no immediate reward. That's where wealth is decided. This is why two people can earn the same income for years and end up in completely different places. One feels perpetually behind. The other feels increasingly calm. The difference is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not accessible, it is orientation. People stuck in dreaming mode are outcome-oriented. They need results to feel safe. They need progress to feel motivated. When progress stalls, anxiety rises. Anxiety leads to urgency. Urgency leads to compromised decisions. People who think like millionaires are process-oriented. They measure success by whether their thinking remains clear under pressure. They don't require constant reassurance from results. They trust alignment more than acceleration. This is why they often move slower and end up further. The first mindset shift is learning to tolerate the absence of feedback. When you stop asking how much you can make, you lose the emotional hit of short-term wins. You lose the thrill of imagining sudden breakthroughs. What you gain is something most people never learn to handle: quiet consistency. Quiet consistency feels like nothing is happening, and that is exactly why it works. Most people abandon strategies not because they fail, but because they feel invisible. And there is no applause for correct thinking. There is no dopamine rush for restraint. There is no immediate signal that patience is paying off. Millionaire thinking accepts this trade. It understands that thinking clearly today often looks like stagnation from the outside and progress from the inside. This shift also changes how mistakes are interpreted. Outcome-focused thinkers personalize losses. They feel embarrassed, discouraged, or defensive. They either double down emotionally or retreat entirely. Thinking-focused individuals depersonalize outcomes. A loss is not a judgment. It is data. It reveals misalignment. It invites adjustment, nothing more. This emotional distance is not coldness, it is freedom. Because once you stop needing money to validate your thinking becomes better. And another consequence of this shift is how decisions are framed. Instead of asking, "Will this make me money?" the question becomes, "Will this reinforce the way I want to think long term?" That question filters out most distractions immediately. It eliminates shortcuts that feel exciting but weaken discipline. It exposes habits that feel harmless but erode clarity. It prioritizes actions that don't look impressive but build control. Over time, this creates an internal environment where money behaves differently, not magically, mechanically. Money begins to respond because your thinking has become predictable. Predictable thinking leads to predictable behavior. Predictable behavior leads to predictable outcomes. Predictable outcomes create stability. Stability is attractive to capital. This is why the first mindset shift often feels like losing momentum. You are no longer chasing visible progress. You are refining invisible foundations. You are training your mind to operate without urgency. Urgency is the enemy of wealth. It compresses time. It distorts risk. It turns decisions into reactions. Millionaires recognize urgency as a signal, not to act faster, but to slow down. When the question changes from "how much can I make" to "how do I think?" urgency loses its power. You stop negotiating with impulses. You stop rushing clarity. You stop measuring yourself against noise. Instead, you begin to notice something subtle. Your decisions feel lighter. Your choices feel cleaner. Your attention feels less scattered. This is not accidental. Thinking clearly is exhausting at first because it removes emotional shortcuts. But once the habit forms, it becomes calming. You stop arguing with reality. You stop hoping outcomes will rescue you. You build from where you are. This is the point where money stops feeling like a moving target and starts feeling like a consequence waiting its turn. The shift is not dramatic. There is no moment where everything clicks. There is only a quiet realization. If you can control how you think, you no longer need to chase how much you make. And that realization changes the trajectory permanently. 4. Why millionaires think in systems. Most people organize their financial lives around events. A paycheck, a promotion, a deal that finally works, a lucky break that changes everything. Events feel powerful because they create visible movement. They give the mind something to point at and say, "This is progress." But events are temporary by nature. They spike, then disappear. And once they pass, you're back where you started, waiting for the next one. Millionaires do not build their lives around events. They build around systems. This is one of the most important distinctions in how wealth is actually created. An event pays you once. A system pays you repeatedly. An event depends on timing. A system depends on design. People who dream about money chase events because events promise relief. And they imagine that one moment, one opportunity, will finally release the pressure. And so their attention stays locked on what might happen next. People who think like millionaires design systems because systems remove pressure. Once a system is in place, the outcome no longer relies on motivation, mood, or constant effort. This is why systems feel boring to most people. They lack drama. They don't produce immediate excitement. They require patience before they show visible results. And that is exactly why they work. Systems shift wealth from the emotional realm into the mechanical one. They turn decision-making into a process. They reduce the number of choices you have to make each day. They protect you from yourself. A system doesn't ask how you feel today. It only asks whether it is being followed. Most people underestimate how much their financial outcomes are driven by moment-to-moment decisions. Small reactions, small impulses, small compromises. Over time, these accumulate into instability. Millionaires think in systems to eliminate this accumulation. They design routines that make the right behavior automatic and the wrong behavior inconvenient. They reduce reliance on willpower. They remove friction from consistency. This is not about complexity. In fact, the best systems are simple. Simple enough to repeat. Simple enough to survive boredom. Simple enough to operate under stress. This is where many people go wrong. They assume systems require sophistication. They chase complexity because complexity feels intelligent. But complexity is fragile. It breaks under pressure. It requires constant attention. And millionaires prefer systems that survive neglect. This is why they are drawn to things that compound quietly. Skills that deepen with use, assets that grow with time, relationships that strengthen through consistency. They invest in structures that don't need constant stimulation to function. Dreamers focus on effort. Millionaires focus on leverage. Effort scales linearly. Leverage scales exponentially. A system is leverage applied over time. Once you see this, your priorities begin to change. You stop asking whether something feels productive today. You start asking whether it continues to work tomorrow and the day after that, without requiring additional energy. This also changes how failure is interpreted. When an event fails, people feel personally defeated. When a system underperforms, it is adjusted. There is no drama, no shame, just refinement. Systems create emotional distance, and emotional distance is essential for wealth. Another quiet advantage of systems is that they slow you down in the right way. They force you to think long-term because they don't reward impatience. You can't rush compounding. You can't negotiate with time. People who resist systems usually do so because systems expose impatience. They make it impossible to pretend you are progressing when you are not. Systems tell the truth. This is uncomfortable at first. It feels restrictive. It feels like giving up flexibility, but what you're actually giving up is chaos. Chaos feels like freedom until you live inside it long enough. Millionaires choose systems not because they want control, but because they want peace. Once a system is built, they don't have to think about it constantly. The mental space opens up. Attention becomes available for higher leverage decisions. This is why wealthy people often appear relaxed about money. It's not because they don't care. It's because much of their financial life is no longer being decided in real time. Decisions were made earlier. Structures were put in place. Rules were defined when emotions were calm. And now those rules quietly run in the background. People who rely on events are always on alert, always waiting, always reacting. People who rely on systems are rarely surprised. Variations happen, but they happen within expected ranges. Predictability is not boring to millionaires. It is power. Another subtle shift occurs when you begin to think in systems. You stop needing motivation. Motivation is volatile. It comes and goes. Systems don't care whether you're inspired. This is why people who wait to feel ready rarely build wealth. Readiness is emotional. Systems are structural. When your financial life is system-driven, consistency replaces intensity. You no longer need heroic effort. You need follow-through, and follow-through is easier than motivation. Over time, these systems begin to shape identity. You start to see yourself differently. Not as someone chasing money, but as someone who builds things that produce value. That identity shift is crucial, because money doesn't follow desire. It follows structure. When your life is organized around systems, money stops being unpredictable. It becomes a byproduct of design, as it arrives not in bursts of excitement, but in streams of reliability. This is the quiet genius of thinking in systems. No rush, no drama, just steady alignment between how you think, how you act, and how value accumulates. And once that alignment exists, wealth is no longer a mystery. It is simply the result of systems doing what they were designed to do over time. 5. Time is the real filter. Most people think time is something they are running out of. They feel behind, late, pressed. Every decision feels urgent because time feels scarce. And when time feels scarce, thinking narrows. You want results now, not because now is optimal, but because waiting feels unbearable. Millionaires see time differently. They don't see time as an enemy. They see it as a filter. Time filters out weak strategies. Time filters out emotional decisions. Time filters out people who cannot sit still long enough for compounding to work. This is one of the quiet advantages most people never develop. Dreamers think in weeks and months. They ask what will change soon. They measure progress by visible movement. When nothing seems to happen, doubt creeps in. They start adjusting too early, switching directions, not chasing something new. Millionaire thinking stretches the timeline. Instead of asking, "Is this working yet?" they ask, "Will this still be working 5 years from now?" That question eliminates most distractions immediately. Time has a way of exposing impatience. Strategies that rely on excitement, novelty, or constant motivation collapse under long timelines. Only what is durable survives. This is why time rewards calm people disproportionately. Calm allows consistency. Consistency allows compounding. Compounding requires time. You cannot shortcut this sequence. Most people overestimate what can change in a year and underestimate what can change in a decade. This miscalculation is one of the most expensive mistakes in personal finance. When you compress time, you compress judgment. You take risks that feel reasonable, short-term, but become dangerous long-term. You prioritize speed over resilience. You trade sustainability for excitement. Millionaires reverse this. They accept slower, visible progress in exchange for stronger foundations. They are willing to look unimpressive early because they understand that early stages are not for showing off. They are for building. This patience is not passive. It is intentional. They are not waiting for time to save them. They are aligning with time so it can work on their behalf. Time is neutral. It does not favor effort or desire. It favors alignment. It magnifies whatever is repeated consistently. If you repeat emotional decisions, time amplifies volatility. If you repeat disciplined decisions, time amplifies stability. And this is why time feels cruel to some people and generous to others. It is not treating them differently. It is revealing the nature of their behavior. People who fear time often avoid commitments that take years to mature. They hesitate to start small because small feels insignificant. They abandon processes that don't produce immediate validation. But significance is not created quickly. Wealth is not built by intensity. It is built by duration. Millionaires understand that staying in the game is more important than winning early. They protect their ability to continue. They avoid decisions that could remove them from the game entirely, even if those decisions promise big rewards. This is why they are conservative, where others are reckless. Not because they lack courage, but because they respect the cost of elimination. See, time punishes elimination. Once you are out of the game, compounding stops. Recovery becomes harder. Confidence erodes. Emotional thinking returns. So millionaires guard longevity above all else. This also changes how they define progress. Progress is not measured by excitement or visible change. It is measured by whether systems are still running, whether discipline is still intact, whether identity remains stable. Slow progress that continues beats fast progress that collapses. This is a difficult truth for people raised on quick wins and instant feedback. Modern life trains us to expect immediate results. Notifications, metrics, updates, everything demands constant confirmation. Wealth does not. Wealth grows in silence. Time rewards those who can tolerate silence. Another effect of long-term thinking is emotional regulation. When you stop expecting immediate results, emotional swings soften. You stop riding highs and lows. Decisions feel less dramatic. Mistakes feel less fatal. This emotional stability compounds as well. Calm thinking attracts better opportunities. Clear thinking avoids obvious traps. Stable thinking creates trust with others and with yourself. Over years, this compounds into something rare. Confidence without urgency. That confidence is unmistakable. It shows how decisions are made, in what is ignored, in how little explanation is needed. People who respect time do not rush to prove anything. They know that time will do the proving for them. This is why many wealthy people appear unimpressed by short-term success stories. They have seen enough cycles to know how quickly excitement fades. They are watching for endurance, not momentum. Time is the final judge. It cannot be negotiated with. It cannot be persuaded. It only responds to repetition. Once you internalize this, your behavior changes quietly. You stop seeking validation. You stop measuring yourself against noise. You start building for outcomes that unfold slowly but reliably. You trade speed for certainty. You trade urgency for clarity. You trade fantasy for structure. This is not glamorous, but it is effective. When you stop fighting time and start cooperating with it, wealth stops feeling distant. It stops feeling accidental. It becomes a predictable consequence of staying aligned long enough. And time does not reward those who want more. It rewards those who last. And learning how to last, calmly, deliberately, without burning out, is one of the most valuable skills a millionaire ever develops. Because once time is on your side, very little else needs to be. 6. Emotional discipline. Around money. Most financial mistakes are not caused by a lack of knowledge. They are caused by a lack of emotional discipline. People often assume that wealth is built by intelligence, by knowing the right strategies, the right investments, the right opportunities. But knowledge only works when the mind is calm enough to use it. Under emotional pressure, intelligence collapses. This is why two people can read the same book, hear the same advice, and take completely different actions. One remains steady, the other overreacts. The difference is not understanding, It is emotional control. Money is one of the strongest emotional triggers in modern life. It touches survival, identity, status, and fear, all at once. When these emotions are activated, thinking becomes distorted. The millionaires do not eliminate emotion from their lives. They train themselves to prevent emotion from making financial decisions. This discipline is subtle. It is not about suppression. It is about delay, the ability to pause before reacting. Most people react first and rationalize later. They justify impulsive decisions by calling them intuition or gut feeling. But intuition built on anxiety is not intuition. It is fear disguised as speed. Millionaires treat strong emotions as warning signals, not instructions. When excitement spikes, they slow down. When fear rises, they reduce exposure. When boredom appears, they pay attention. Boredom is especially important. For most people, boredom feels like stagnation. They interpret it as a sign that something is wrong. They crave stimulation, they seek novelty, they want movement. But boredom is often a signal that emotion has been removed from the process. And that is when compounding begins. Emotional discipline allows you to stay with processes that don't produce constant feedback. It allows you to repeat small, correct actions without needing validation. It allows you to trust structure over sensation. This is why wealthy thinkers are comfortable doing things that look unremarkable from the outside. They don't need to feel clever or excited. They need to be consistent. Consistency requires calm. One of the most dangerous emotions around money is urgency. Urgency compresses time and inflates risk. It convinces you that acting quickly is more important than acting correctly. Urgency creates blind spots. People under urgency overestimate upside and underestimate downside. They ignore second-order consequences. They commit to decisions that cannot be undone easily. Millionaires recognize urgency as an internal state, not an external demand. They ask, "Why do I feel rushed?" Not, "What should I do next?" This shift alone prevents countless mistakes. Another emotional trap is comparison. When you constantly measure yourself against others, your decisions stop being about alignment and start being about status. You chase what looks impressive rather than what works. Comparison fuels impatience. Impatience erodes discipline. Discipline is the foundation of wealth. Millionaires limit comparison intentionally. They understand that visibility distorts judgment. They know that seeing highlights without context leads to false conclusions. They compare only against their own systems, against their own rules, against their own long-term goals. This creates emotional insulation. Emotional discipline also shows up in how losses are handled. Most people experience losses as personal failures. They feel shame, anger, or the urge to recover quickly. This emotional charge often leads to revenge decisions, attempts to win back what was lost by taking even greater risks. Millionaires avoid this spiral by separating identity from outcome. A loss does not mean they are wrong as a person. A gain does not mean they are right forever. Both are temporary. Both are incomplete information. This neutrality is powerful. It allows them to step back, reassess, and adjust without panic. It allows them to preserve capital, financial and emotional. Capital is not just money. It is clarity. It is confidence. It is the ability to make the next decision well. Emotional discipline protects all three. Now, one of the most overlooked aspects of emotional control is knowing when to do nothing. Most people feel compelled to act. They equate action with progress. Millionaires understand that inactivity can be a strategic choice. Sometimes the best decision is to wait, to observe, to allow uncertainty to resolve. Doing nothing requires emotional strength. It means tolerating ambiguity. It means resisting the urge to feel productive. This restraint separates thinkers from reactors. Over time, emotional discipline becomes a habit. Reactions soften, decisions slow down. The nervous system stops being constantly activated. And when the nervous system is calm, thinking improves. Improved thinking leads to better positioning. Better positioning attracts better opportunities. Better opportunities reinforce confidence. This is a quiet feedback loop. People who lack emotional discipline often believe they need more courage. In reality, they need less reactivity. Courage without control becomes recklessness. Millionaires do not seek intensity, they seek stability. They design their financial lives to reduce emotional spikes. They avoid environments that amplify fear or excitement. They choose clarity over stimulation. This is not weakness, it is strategic restraint. When emotions are regulated, money stops feeling unpredictable. It behaves more like a system and less like a threat. This is why emotional discipline around money is not optional. It is foundational. Without it, knowledge is wasted. With it, so even simple strategies work, and once emotional discipline is in place, something unexpected happens. Money stops demanding your attention. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, more reliable. Not because you care less, but because you finally stopped letting emotion make decisions it was never meant to make. This is the calm edge most people never develop, and the one that allows wealth to grow without destroying peace along the way. 7. Identity before income. Most people believe money changes who you are. Millionaires understand that money follows who you become. This is one of the least visible, yet most decisive, differences in how wealth is built. When people focus on income first, they're asking money to do the work of identity. They hope that earning more will finally make them feel confident, disciplined, respected, or secure. In this model, money is expected to fix internal uncertainty. It never does. Income amplifies identity. It does not replace it. If your decisions are reactive, more money creates bigger reactions. If your habits are unstable, more money increases instability. If your thinking is unclear, more money multiplies confusion. This is why sudden financial gains often disappear. The identity that receives the money is not structured to hold it. And so millionaires reverse the sequence. They become the kind of person who can hold, deploy, and protect capital, long before large sums appear. By the time money arrives, the internal systems are already in place. Identity comes first. Income follows. Identity is not about labels or titles. It is about patterns. What you tolerate, what you repeat, what you protect, what you walk away from even when it is tempting. These patterns operate quietly, below conscious awareness. Most people underestimate how much their financial life is shaped by self-image. They act in ways that are consistent with who they believe they are. If they see themselves as bad with money, they will eventually confirm that belief. If they see wealth as something for other people, they will sabotage progress without realizing it. And millionaires are careful with identity. They do not define themselves by short-term outcomes. A bad month does not make them irresponsible. A good year does not make them brilliant. They anchor identity to behavior, not results. This creates emotional stability. When identity is stable, decisions become easier. You don't have to negotiate with yourself every time. You already know how someone like you behaves. Someone like you plans ahead. Someone like you thinks long-term. Someone like you avoids unnecessary risk. Identity simplifies choice. This is why people who focus on income often feel exhausted. Every decision requires willpower. Every situation feels like a test. There is no default mode to fall back on. People who build identity first conserve energy. Their behavior is aligned with their self-image, and so action feels natural instead of forced. Another quiet shift occurs when identity is prioritized. Money stops being personal. When your sense of self is not tied to your bank balance, financial outcomes lose their emotional charge. A loss is disappointing, not devastating. A gain is satisfying, not intoxicating. This emotional neutrality is not detachment. It is groundedness. Grounded people are hard to shake, and stability attracts resources. Identity. First thinkers also understand that wealth requires saying no, often to things that look attractive. They are comfortable being misunderstood. They don't need external validation for disciplined choices. This is why millionaire behavior often looks unimpressive from the outside. It lacks drama. It lacks visible struggle. It lacks the narrative arc people expect. But underneath that simplicity is a firm identity. Identity also governs environment. People who think like millionaires curate their inputs. They are selective about who they listen to, what they consume, and where they place attention. Not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. They know that constant exposure to noise distorts judgment. They limit voices that amplify fear, urgency, or comparison. They choose calm environments because calm supports clear thinking. This environmental discipline reinforces identity. You cannot build a stable identity in a chaotic environment. Most people try to fix money problems by changing tactics. Millionaires change context first. They shape surroundings that make disciplined behavior easier and impulsive behavior harder. Identity is built through repetition. Every time you choose patience over urgency, identity strengthens. Every time you choose clarity over excitement, identity solidifies. Every time you protect capital instead of chasing status, identity deepens. These choices seem small, but identity compounds just like money. Over time, you stop asking, "Should I do this?" You ask, "Is this who I am?" That question is powerful, because once identity is clear, income becomes a byproduct. Opportunities align. People trust you. Systems respond to consistency. Money flows toward predictability. This is why millionaires do not obsess over income targets. Targets change. Identity endures. When identity is correct, income adjusts naturally. People who chase income without shaping identity often feel like they're wearing someone else's clothes. Success feels uncomfortable. Responsibility feels heavy. They are constantly afraid of losing what they gained. People who build identity first feel at home in wealth. It does not overwhelm them, it fits. This sense of fit is crucial. Money stays where it feels safe. It stays where decisions are predictable. It stays where identity supports stewardship. Becoming that person takes time. It requires restraint. It requires saying no to shortcuts that promise faster income at the cost of integrity. But once identity is in place, the pressure lifts. You stop trying to prove anything. You stop needing money to confirm your worth. You start making decisions from clarity instead of compensation. And in that state, income stops being chased. It arrives because you have already become the kind of person it follows. 8. The quiet laws. Money obeys. Money feels mysterious only when you believe it is emotional. When people struggle financially, they often describe money as unpredictable, something that comes and goes without warning. They attribute success to luck, timing, or talent. And when things go wrong, they blame circumstances. But money is not random, it is not personal, and it is not impressed by effort alone. Money obeys laws. These laws are quiet. They don't announce themselves. They don't care about intention, morality, or fairness. They operate whether you understand them or not. The same way gravity operates whether you believe in it or not. One of the most misunderstood laws is this: money responds to clarity, not desire. Desire is emotional. Clarity is structural, as you can want money intensely and still repel it through confused decisions. You can care deeply and still act inconsistently. Money does not reward caring. It rewards coherence. Coherence means that your thinking, behavior, and decisions point in the same direction over time. When they don't, money leaks. Another quiet law is consistency over intensity. Most people try to compensate for inconsistency with intensity. They work harder in bursts. They make dramatic changes. They overcorrect after mistakes. This creates movement, but not momentum. Momentum requires repetition. Money flows toward behaviors that can be repeated without emotional strain. It avoids environments where outcomes depend on constant effort, constant motivation, or constant vigilance. This is why systems outperform willpower. A related law is asymmetry of risk. Money is cautious. It prefers environments where downside is controlled and upside is allowed to grow. When you expose money to unnecessary risk, it leaves. When you protect it patiently, it stays. People who don't understand this law chase returns before securing resilience. They focus on growth without protection. When volatility appears, they panic. Panic destroys structure. Millionaires respect downside first. They do not ask, "How much can I make?" They ask, "What can I lose if I'm wrong?" That single question filters out most bad decisions. Another law money obeys is value creation over activity. Effort is visible. Value is subtle. Most people confuse being busy with being valuable. They fill their days with tasks, meetings, and motion, hoping activity will translate into income. But money does not pay for movement, but it pays for usefulness. Usefulness compounds. When you solve the same problem repeatedly, or solve a problem that grows over time, money begins to accumulate without proportional effort. This is why leverage matters. Not financial leverage, but conceptual leverage. Ideas that scale, skills that deepen, systems that operate without supervision. Money responds to leverage because leverage reduces friction. Another quiet law is patience under uncertainty. Money does not arrive on predictable schedules. There are periods where effort produces no visible reward. These periods eliminate impatient participants. Only those who continue without reassurance remain. This is not punishment. It is filtering. Most people quit not because something fails, but because it fails to validate them quickly. Money stays with those who don't require constant feedback. This is why calm people outperform anxious ones over long periods. Anxiety demands certainty. Wealth requires tolerance for ambiguity. Another law money obeys is environment over intention. Your environment shapes your decisions more than your goals ever will. If you place yourself in environments that amplify fear, comparison, or urgency, your decisions will reflect that, regardless of how strong your intentions are. Money avoids chaotic environments. It stays where decisions are made deliberately, where inputs are controlled, where noise is minimized. Millionaires design environments that support long-term thinking. They limit exposure to constant stimulation. They create routines that reduce emotional decision-making. This is not discipline. It is design. Thus, another law is identity alignment. Money flows toward people whose behavior is predictable. Predictability creates trust. Trust attracts capital, opportunities, and partnerships. When your identity is unstable, money behaves erratically around you. When your identity is clear, money becomes more consistent. This is why people who frequently change direction struggle to build wealth. Not because change is bad, but because constant change signals uncertainty. Money prefers clarity. There is also a law of delayed recognition. Often the behaviors that produce wealth are invisible for a long time. Progress happens beneath the surface. Roots grow before anything appears above ground. Most people abandon correct behavior because it doesn't feel productive. They mistake invisibility for inefficiency. Money does not. It accumulates quietly until conditions align, and then it appears suddenly. What looks like luck from the outside is often delayed consequence. Another law is restraint before expansion. Money responds poorly to overextension. When people try to do too much at once, they dilute attention and weaken execution. They spread resources thin and lose control. Millionaires expand only after stability is established. They allow systems to prove themselves before adding complexity. This restraint preserves clarity. Finally, money obeys the law of emotional neutrality. When decisions are made to relieve fear, impress others, or soothe insecurity, money becomes unstable. Emotional motives introduce distortion. Money responds best when decisions are made from calm evaluation, not emotional urgency. This neutrality is not coldness. It is maturity. When you understand these laws, money stops feeling unpredictable. It begins to behave consistently, not because the world changed, but because your alignment with these laws improved. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop chasing shortcuts. You stop asking money to do what it was never meant to do. You start positioning yourself where money naturally flows. The laws were always there. They were always operating. The difference is that now you see them. And once you see the laws, money obeys. You no longer have to chase it. You simply have to stop violating them and let time do the rest. 9. From wanting wealth to becoming wealthy. There is a moment that quietly separates those who chase money from those who build it. It is the moment when the question changes. Most people spend their lives asking, when will money finally arrive? They wait for a number, a milestone, a point at which they can relax. But people who become wealthy stop asking that question entirely. They begin asking something else. Who am I becoming through the decisions I make every day? This shift is subtle, but decisive. Wanting wealth is emotional. Becoming wealthy is behavioral. Wanting keeps your attention on the future. Becoming anchors your attention in the present. When you want wealth, you're waiting for money to change your life. When you are becoming wealthy, you're changing your life so money has somewhere stable to land. This is why so many people feel permanently almost there. They are oriented toward arrival, not transformation. They imagine that once money shows up, discipline will follow, calm will follow, clarity will follow. But wealth does not work in that order. Calm comes first, clarity comes first, discipline comes first. Money follows those states. Becoming wealthy means that money is no longer the main character in your thinking. It becomes a background signal, important, but not dominant. You stop negotiating with money emotionally. You stop using it to measure your worth or your progress. Instead, you start measuring something else. Consistency, stability, alignment. You begin to notice whether your days reinforce the kind of person who holds wealth well, whether your decisions reflect patience or urgency, is whether your reactions create order or chaos. This is not dramatic work. It is quiet, repetitive, and often invisible. But it compounds faster than desire ever could. One of the clearest signs that someone has shifted from wanting wealth to becoming wealthy is how they handle uncertainty. People who are still wanting need reassurance. They need signs that they are on the right path. They need validation that effort will pay off. People who are becoming wealthy do not need constant confirmation. They understand that uncertainty is part of the process. They are comfortable moving without applause. This comfort is not confidence in outcomes. It is confidence in behavior. They trust that if they continue to act from clarity, money will eventually reflect that alignment. Another sign of this shift is patience with results and impatience with misalignment. When you are wanting wealth, you are impatient with results and tolerant of internal inconsistency. When you are becoming wealthy, that flips. You become intolerant of sloppy thinking. You notice emotional decisions immediately. You correct course without drama. Results are allowed to take time. Misalignment is not. This reversal changes everything. You stop chasing speed. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop comparing timelines. You build quietly. Becoming wealthy also changes how success is experienced. There is less excitement and more steadiness, less urgency and more control. Instead of highs and lows, there is a growing sense of inevitability. Not inevitability in a mystical sense, but in a mechanical one. Behavior is correct and repeated long enough, outcomes adjust. This understanding removes desperation. Desperation is what causes people to abandon good strategies too early. It is what leads to shortcuts, overextension, and emotional decisions. When desperation disappears, discipline becomes sustainable. You begin to value boring progress. Boring progress means things are working. It means systems are running. It means risk is controlled. It means you are still in the game. People who want wealth often feel restless during periods of stability. They interpret calm as stagnation. They crave movement. They need to feel like something big is happening. People who are becoming wealthy feel at ease during stability. They know that calm is the environment in which compounding thrives. This is also when money starts behaving differently. It arrives with less friction. It stays longer. It leaves less often. Not because you are smarter, but because you are steadier. Becoming wealthy also means letting go of the fantasy that money will solve internal discomfort. You stop expecting money to provide meaning, confidence, or identity. You build those internally first. As a result, money stops being a source of tension. You don't grip it tightly. You don't chase it anxiously. You don't fear losing it excessively. You steward it. Stewardship is the natural state of wealth. When you become wealthy internally, money becomes external confirmation, not emotional compensation. It becomes a tool that reflects order rather than a force that creates it. This is why wealth often appears suddenly to outsiders. They don't see the internal shift. They don't see the years of identity alignment, emotional discipline, and system building. They only see the moment when money shows up. But for the person who becomes wealthy, nothing about that moment feels sudden. It feels expected. Not because they felt entitled, but because they knew their behavior had been consistent long enough. The shift from wanting wealth to becoming wealthy is not about stopping ambition. It is about redirecting ambition inward. You stop aiming at money. You start aiming at coherence. You stop asking when things will change. You start changing how you think and decide. And somewhere along that path, money stops being a question. It becomes an outcome, quiet, predictable, unavoidable. And that is what it means to become wealthy. Not to want more, but to become someone for whom wealth makes sense. At the beginning, money felt like something distant, something you had to chase, hope for, or wait on. A future condition that would finally allow you to relax. But as you've moved through this journey, something quieter has likely begun to settle. A realization. Money was never meant to be chased. It was meant to follow. Follow clarity. Follow consistency. Follow a way of thinking that remains calm when others rush, steady when others react, and patient when others quit. The shift from dreaming about money to thinking like a millionaire is not dramatic. It does not arrive with fireworks or sudden breakthroughs. It arrives slowly, almost invisibly, as your relationship with time, decisions, and identity begins to change. You stop needing money to rescue you. You stop asking it to validate you, and you stop believing it will fix what was never financial to begin with. And in that space, something opens. You begin to see money for what it is. Not a reward, not a judgment, not a measure of worth, but a response. A response to how you think, how you decide, and how consistently you act when no one is watching. Wealth is not built through intensity. It is built through alignment. Alignment between who you are becoming and how you move through the world. Alignment between your values and your behavior. Alignment between your patience and your long-term vision. When that alignment is present, money becomes predictable, not fast, not exciting, but reliable. This is the kind of wealth that does not create anxiety. The kind that does not demand constant attention. The kind that fits into your life instead of dominating it. Saying, and perhaps most importantly, this is the kind of wealth that does not require you to sacrifice peace to obtain it. The world is loud. It rewards urgency, noise, and visible effort. But money listens to something else entirely. It listens to stability, to coherence, to people who can think clearly while others are distracted by emotion. If there is one thing to carry forward from this audiobook, let it be this. You do not need to become someone else to build wealth. You need to become more consistent with who you already are at your best. More disciplined, more patient, more intentional. When you do that, money stops being a question. It becomes an outcome, one that unfolds naturally, quietly, and in its own time. This is not the end of the journey. It is the point where the journey becomes lighter, where you stop forcing, stop chasing, stop proving, and begin allowing the long arc of correct thinking to do its work. Because once your thinking changes, wealth no longer has a choice. It follows.